Hartmann also had an unusual gut-level understanding of aircraft and air power, that intangible right stuff that all the great pilots seem to have. He always said that he could just sense when something was wrong with his plane well before any cockpit gauge reported it to him. This was undoubtedly true. The pilot's sixth sense doesn't seem mystical at all to anyone who knows piloting. In the fight, Hartmann was calculating and cool-headed, wasting neither bullets nor wingmen. He was always more of a tactician than a brawler, and he tended to skirt around risky situations and only attacked when the odds were favorable, which was often. Any guru of air combat, from the early aces of World War I to today's Top Gun instructors, would admire Hartmann's diligent application of the timeless rules of engagement. Attack from the sun, seek the higher altitude to conserve speed and energy, fly with your head, not your muscles. He believed in those principles and adhered to them more completely than almost anything else in his life. Throughout the war, Hartmann tangled with the full spectrum of enemies, and he defeated them all. These included hundreds of hapless, unseasoned Soviets hamstrung by subpar equipment and training, as well as their elite squadron mates, whom Hartmann considered some of the fiercest and most dangerous pilots of the war. In general, Soviet pilots acquired a reputation for being unwise and ill-prepared, and this was sometimes true, though it was also influenced by unreflective bias. But Hartmann also acknowledged their refinements and strengths as soldiers. His postings took him all over the Eastern Front, from the early days in the Russian South to the Wehrmacht's final retraction back within German borders, where it was finally snuffed out as the Western and Eastern fronts converged. Hartmann's 352nd kill came on the very last day of the European War, and that engagement is a good window into his experience as a hunter. It took place early in the morning over the city of Brno in what is now the Czech Republic. By this point, Soviet fighter pilots could frolic with impunity above the smoldering cities because the airspace was all but empty of Germans. The Luftwaffe had been crushed, and the conflict had ground to a halt. Hitler was dead somewhere in Berlin. One Yak-7 pilot was celebrating his country's victory with a lazy loop above the firestorms below. With typical good timing, Hartmann dropped in behind him in his Messerschmitt Bf 109, undetected, and squeezed off a burst of gunfire that sent the clueless Yak pilot tumbling to the ground. The engagement took all of a few seconds. Hartmann's kills usually were this fast, and his appearance usually was this surprising to his victims. The other Soviets in the area, suddenly aware that they had been ambushed, reeled in confusion. Hartmann resisted any temptation to engage more enemies and continued diving toward a lower altitude, throttle wide open, where he could dash away camouflaged against the trees. While he sped toward base, he glanced back toward his 6 o'clock and saw that the Americans were arriving over Brno in their glistening bare-metal P-51 Mustangs. To Hartmann's surprise, maybe amusement, the Allied fighters had begun dogfighting furiously with each other. Were the Mustangs and Yaks mistaken, or just anticipatory? Either way, Hartmann left them to it. He flew on to complete his last mission and await the ground forces poised to overrun his airfield. The Eastern Front, we know, was one of the most gruesome theaters of war in history. It was mind-numbingly desolate, vast almost beyond comprehension, usually either frozen or covered by infinite muck, and, to a rigidly trained and indoctrinated German, foreign in 100 difficult ways. The campaign in the East was Germany's signature strategic catastrophe, but it was also, oddly, the key to Hartmann's success. Despite the crushing turn of fortunes at Stalingrad, Moscow, and elsewhere, Hartmann flew above it all, free to engage endless streams of advancing Soviet fighters and bombers. The same industrial revival that made the Soviet Air Force a viable opposing force to Hitler also made Hartmann's airspace saturated with targets, and day after day he saw.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.